So, I won't even sugarcoat it. This is a tough game to talk about. If you want the cliff notes of what's on my mind with Slitterhead, then I'll put it this way. I liked Slitterhead. I liked it a lot, actually. I think it's a really cool game with some awesome ideas. But I can't quite bring myself to recommend it without a bunch of yellow tape. So if that's all you wanted to hear, then I'm happy to have been of service. If you want to know why I feel that way though, then let me just yap your ear off for at least a little bit. I've been following Bokeh Studio, if I'm pronouncing Bokeh right, since their inception, and have been looking forward to their first game for a while, ever since they even hinted that they were working on this thing. Yes, I'm well aware that Keiichiro Toyama, the creator of Silent Hill, is one of the minds behind this project, and that Bokeh itself actually made the Siren games back in the day, as well as the Gravity Rush games. They have a heck of a portfolio right there. So I was fairly confident in the game they were making as their first project as a AA-ish indie studio. Did they accomplish that? Well, that depends on who you ask. If you saw Keiichiro Toyama's name and were expecting something groundbreaking on the level of the first Silent Hill game, then you were, generally speaking, probably very disappointed. If you played the Siren games and enjoyed those quite a bit, then I'd imagine you probably liked this game a lot, despite its faults. If you just liked the vibes from the game based on the trailers that you saw, then you might still be mixed on it in general. And if you were hoping for a truly terrifying experience that'd keep you up at night, then you're probably sorely disappointed. Unless you're not one to really take, I guess, body horror and it actually does keep you up at night, which in that case, yes, you probably couldn't sleep after playing this game.
Baby, you smell good.
You don't want to be like this.
For me, I'd say I fall into the camp of, if you played the Siren games camp, even though I haven't played the Siren games. I own one of them on PS2, but the only experience I have with them are several retrospectives where I thought, man, those look cool. I wish I could play them without having to hunt for a copy or sail the seven seas, but we could talk about game preservation a different day. The point I'm making is that I enjoyed this game despite its faults. So what did I like about it and what did I not like about it that's got me so mixed? Well, you know me at this point. I'm the kind of guy who wants to talk about narrative if narrative is something that weighs on my mind a lot in these kinds of games. Otherwise, I'll just put narrative wherever in my review, so I'm opening with narrative. And to avoid spoilers, because this game is kind of wonky in how it tells its story, so I might accidentally slip and say a spoiler and not realize it until after I've already said it, to which then I could actually just edit it out, so I don't know why I'm prefacing it this way, but you get it. I'm just going to read from the Steam chunk. Set in the densely cluttered streets of Kowloon, filled with obscurity and chaos, this battle action-adventure game casts players as the Hyoki, an entity devoid of memory and physical form. His only motive is to eradicate the monstrous beings known as Slitterheads, crawling around the city, disguising themselves as humans. Roaming the vibrant neon-lit cityscape, players must seek out allies among humans known as rarities, infiltrate and track dangerous organizations, and engage in battles harnessing the power of blood. As the suspenseful drama unfolds, delve into the mystery behind Hyoki's existence and the appearance of the Slitterheads. I'll kick it off with the obvious. I love the vibes of this game. The initial announcement trailer made the game look a bit scarier than it actually is, but at the same time, it never really fully advertised itself as a survival horror game or anything to begin with. In fact, it was very apparent that we were getting an action-adventure game with a horrific coat of paint, which is completely fine with me. The game sticks its legs into horror whenever someone transforms into a Slitterhead. Generally speaking, it's more terrifying, well, terrifying in air quotes, it's more disturbing or off-putting, in my opinion, in cinematics than it is in game where the transformations are pretty quick. But beyond that, the game has little to no scares. If you're walking into this expecting a horror game like Silent Hill 2 Remake, Resident Evil 7, heck, even the old Siren games in terms of horror vibes or just straight up horror, then it doesn't go into that territory. For me, this wasn't disappointing, but for you it might be. For me, it just made me more intrigued in what they were trying to accomplish here. Beyond the vibes, the visuals of the game are pretty cool and stylized. I love the look of Kowloon and how packed and crowded it is, as well as how the pre-rendered cinematics as well as conversation scenes with various characters look. That said, what I can't jive with is how the NPCs look. You know, all of the non-important characters. Now, I get it. The NPCs should never have higher priority in how they look compared to your main cast. Not all of them need to look like Final Fantasy characters that can be a protagonist in their own game. I get that, and I agree with that. But in a game where NPCs are part of the main combat loop via possession, I'll explain more about that later, I think they could have used more love in the visual department. If I were to make a scale for it from like 1 to 5, the main cast hits 5 in quality. The NPCs should have been a 4 in terms of how they look. You should be able to look at them and be like, I could tell you're not important, but at the same time, I like your cut, G. Instead, what you get in game is more like a 3 if they're of minor importance, and a 2 if they're practically disposable. The disposable part might be the point, but that's just me speculating. The NPCs just clashed when I was possessing an NPC that rarely blinked, and I decided to stand next to a rarity. Now, if I wanted to throw Bokeh Studio a bone for a moment, I could probably see that maybe this decision was made so that it'd be easier to pick out your rarities among other NPCs, so that it's easier for it to be like, that's my rarity, I'm gonna jump into your body now, versus everybody looks equally important. I don't know which one my rarity is. But I think that only holds up to an extent. You don't need to make them look like plastic for me to be able to determine whether or not they're an NPC or a main character. But again, that's me speculating. Overall, the visuals are on point, but some scenes just can't be taken seriously with the NPCs sometimes. As for the main cast of characters, I think they look pretty distinct, though I don't think some of them are used very well beyond their initial purpose, whatever that may be. You get a decent amount of characters to pick from to bring into missions, some are required for plot reasons, but I only really found myself gravitating to about 3 or 4 of them. Your mileage may vary, but overall, most of the cast is generally likable. Emphasis on most, not all of them. Oh, and while I'm on the topic of characters, I must say that the voice acting in the game is mostly restricted to pre-render cutscenes. What you'll be getting from the conversation scenes and general gameplay are just phrases shouted out to give the vibe of what they're trying to say. Like, if someone shows up and they're like, I'm here, quick, possess me. Instead, you'll see that statement in whatever language you're setting the subtitles for, you know what I mean. But out loud, they'll be like, over here, yo, you know, that kind of stuff. Now, this doesn't really bother someone like me who has played games like Persona, Yakuza, Danganronpa, to some extent Monster Hunter does this, you know, stuff like that, where they'll have fully voiced scenes, but most of the time you speak with them, they'll just say a phrase or make a noise to like give the general mood of their sentence that you're supposed to read. The downside to this approach is that it's kind of hard to read while you're fighting in an action game. So it would have been nice if they said their full sentence, in my opinion, because sometimes while I'm fighting and jumping from body to body, I don't know what someone is saying if they're expressing plot while I'm fighting for my life against a Slitterhead. But again, outside of combat, it generally doesn't bother me. But for some of you, it will bother you, especially if you're the kind of person that's like, say, a Final Fantasy XIV player, and you will sit there and eat up every voiced cutscene. But by the time you get to non-voice dialogue, you're kind of just like, I get the gist of what is being said here, skip. I get the gist of what's being said here, skip, skip, skip. You said what now? Oh, that's cool. Skip. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes I'm that player too. So I get it. It's not for everybody. Moving along, I want to give a quick shout to the music in the game. It's by Akira Yamaoka, so once again, the man that did it, he doesn't even need an introduction at this point. With that said though, save for a few tracks, this isn't really the kind of soundtrack that I would blast on Spotify just because it's not really my vibe, but it does suit the atmosphere perfectly. But about 9 minutes in, and now I'm actually going to talk about the gameplay. Forgive me for jumping around a lot. Slitterhead is what happens when you take bits of Siren, the sight jack mechanic, as well as the general vibe of the Siren games, and then blend them with Gravity Rush, and then sprinkle a little bit of possession in there. The sight jack mechanic in this game is primarily used for finding hidden Slitterheads in a mission. And for those who don't know, sight jacking is exactly what it says on the tin. You get to see through the eyes of a Slitterhead to get an idea of where they are based on the environment that you can see through their eyes. Once you find them, you can spray them with blood to get them to reveal themselves. More on the blood part in a little bit. The Gravity Rush components come in with the verticality of the game. While obviously gravity is not being shifted for you to get from place to place when you're going upwards or downwards, you'll still find yourself leaping onto signs and onto rooftops and etc. quite often. Those rooftops and all that as well, populated with people. Not a lot of people compared to who's on the ground, obviously, but enough where the game doesn't feel empty. To climb, you have to use a blood whip kind of thing, where you would just look at a sign or look at anything that the character can kind of just attach a blood tendril to, and you would press the corresponding button and pull yourself upwards to it. You'll be using this for exploration as well as to chase down Slitterheads that are trying to get away from you. By default, there's a climb assist setting that is enabled. I never turned it off in my playthrough though, so I don't really know what it feels like to turn that off and try climbing without it. But honestly, I wasn't even expecting any verticality in this game. I wasn't, well, aside from what I saw in the trailers, but I wasn't expecting how much there would be, I should say. I welcome it with open arms though. And it's nice to actually experience the sight jack mechanic, even if it isn't used for the exact same reasons you would use them in Siren. In Siren, you were the one doing the hiding most of the time, so the sight jack mechanic, besides one use of it that was used to guide a blind character around, was used to help you get an idea of where it was safe to be, or how safe you were, or how far an enemy was from you before you can move along. So I guess in a way it actually is used for the same reason, just you're more on the offensive in this game than you were in Siren. And before I get to the combat portion of this section, no, I haven't forgotten to give my opinions on the story. I'm just getting the other stuff out of the way first. Don't get me wrong, it's all just as important, but I've got some thoughts on the story and they aren't all pretty. But let's talk about combat first. Generally speaking, the combat is on the simple side, but it's unique in some of what it does. It's centered around possessing different bodies so that you don't die while possessing a dying human. To attack, you form a weapon using the blood of an NPC or a rarity that you're currently possessing. So in the case of NPCs, their blood forms into a club weapon. NPCs generally have a smaller health pool than the main cast, so you should be jumping to different bodies often so that you don't get downed while in one. You only get 3 chances to dip out of a down body before it's game over. And by 3 chances, I mean you'll be ejected out of the dying body. You pick a body to jump to. If that body goes down, now you're down 2 chances. You only have 1 more. I think I have my math right. I probably don't. And then, just rinse and repeat until you can't jump out of the body again, or out of a dying body again. Generally speaking, you'll be fighting in an arena setting, be it big arena or small arena. Either way around, you'll have a bunch of NPCs around you, or maybe you won't have many. You have to go run to an open area with more NPCs for you to possess. Do not try and fight some of the tougher Slitterheads by yourself while you're possessing one body. At least get another one. Go somewhere down the street and be like, ah, yes, Disney World, these bodies are mine. Just do that. Do not fight alone in an alley somewhere where there's no one else you can jump to, especially if you're just in an NPC's body. But mainly, you'll be controlling rarity characters. To go over it again, think of rarity characters like main party members you get in a JRPG, or any RPG, or any party-based game. They're main characters along with you, and have their own unique abilities, and can typically take more of a punch than your standard NPC. For example, the first one you get, the first rarity you get, Julie, has some Lady Deathstrike fingernails made up of her blood, so that she can claw at enemies. She also has her own set of unique active abilities, but Like the game points out, you will still want to use NPC bodies as fodder, so that she's not just standing there taking the damage the whole time. You want to jump to other bodies. I can't tell you how much fun it is to kind of goat the enemy or goat a Slitterhead into attacking, say, Julie, again, using her as an example. And I'm just clawing at him. Okay, now he's about to line up and hit me with a big attack, but I want to keep dealing damage. So as he's swinging for the attack, I jump out of Julie's body and I go possess like an old lady behind the enemy. And I'm like, this is going to be a weak strike, but I'm going to hit you until you notice me. Notice me. The Slitterhead turns around. Ah, you're in this body. I'm going to hit you now. Then I jump out of that body and go into another NPC's body across the room. And I just charge in like, yeah, I'm actually right here. Whack him. And then he turns around and looks at that body. And I'm like, ah, Julie's back up. She's okay. Okay, now you're going to strike me. I'm going to possess her again. And now I'm going to fuck up your day. If it isn't clear based on my enthusiasm just describing the whole thing, combat may be simple, it may be repetitive. In fact, people are going to find it very repetitive. Some already have for those who've played it from what I've seen, but I can't get enough of how the combat feels. It's just a lot of fun to manage different HP levels or different amounts of health pools. Like, okay, this person's weak, I need to jump over here, need to jump over here, need to jump over here. One of Julie, spoiler alert, one of her active abilities is to revive people. Once they're dead, they're dead. When it comes to NPCs, rarities don't die, they just get downed, but NPCs will die. So they'll have a counter that counts down as they're bleeding out. If you can get Julie to use her revive all ability, then she uses blood, which you can also use to heal yourself. As any NPC or as any rarity, you can use that same kind of ability to revive down NPCs around you while also healing her. So it helps with tanking damage, but it also helps with getting NPCs off the ground so that you're essentially replenishing your ranks again. It's so cool. I'm not gonna lie, it's so cool. And obviously I mentioned this about Julie, but other characters also have their own active abilities that are related directly to the kind of people they are. Let's put it that way. Later on, you'll learn that you can also lose your arm during combat. A Slitterhead could take out your arm, just straight up. Okay, I'm going to hit you with this heavy attack. You're going to lose an arm. You should possess a different body until that character, whoever lost their arm, has enough blood accumulated or has had enough time to kind of just get away so that you can possess them again and they can grow their arm back. Because so long as you're possessing them, you can press a button prompt to tell them to grow their arm back. Otherwise, they're useless in combat. Overall, while I can see both combat and the general structure of some missions getting very repetitive for some people, for me, I never got bored once. But if I had to bring up one criticism that's gameplay centric, it's that the in-game tutorial pop-ups repeat way too often. Like, I appreciate the reminder, but seeing as there's no way to turn them off, it can get very annoying very fast, and it just breaks up the flow. Especially when you have to / want to repeat missions for unlockables like outfits, masks, or for memories that can be converted into skill points that you can spend on each character to strengthen them. Again, it can get pretty annoying. And now we've reached the big one, the source of my biggest complaint that has me mixed here, and that is the story. Narratively, I won't lie, I was really into the narrative and the weirdness of everything in the narrative. Until the halfway point of the game where it kind of just doubled down on one particular character and seemingly forgot about everything else pertaining to the plot established earlier. It was suddenly about one thing and got railroaded to the end. Granted, you do learn about some things that are supposed to feel understandable and like a resolution, but I don't think it succeeds in doing so. To me, it very much came off like, we established this weird, broad threat and are dealing with it one storyline at a time pertaining to different characters. Okay, cool. Well, now all that's dealt with. Now what do we do? I know, let's focus on just this person and just go from there without answering anything else that we were questioning or wondering was happening earlier. Oh crap, we went a little too hard on that. Now we need to go back and tie up some loose threads. Quick, write some exposition. On top of all of that, you have 3 different endings, 2 of which you can get while playing the game in general, but the true ending requires you to go back and replay missions and get the lowest amount of casualties as possible. I'm not going to explain how that pertains to the plot, but I will say that all you really have to do is go back into those earlier missions and get as few civilians killed as possible. Did I do that?
No.
I just watched the true ending on YouTube. To be fair to the game though, It's rare that I go back and replay a game or even parts of one for the true ending if I feel like I'm not going to revisit it in a soon-ish amount of time. Like, I already don't do that for some games that I really, really love, but I'm definitely not going to be doing it here. It just really feels like they ran out of time to really flesh out that second half to really get me to care more in that part. Because once it started focusing on one particular character, that's when I was like, okay, I want to see where this goes. And then it just kind of tunneled and felt like it was speeding on to the end. And I was just like, I don't know if I like this. I like the twist, but I don't know if I like what's happening. If you were someone who was intrigued on the narrative just to see where it would go and this and the other, then I'd hate to say this, but in my opinion, it's only really interesting for the first half of the game. After that, it loses itself, and that disappoints me. And even in the first half of the game, some parts are pretty predictable. Not going to spoil it, but there is a storyline in there, or story arc, I should say, in there, where I'm like, I think I know where this is going, but sure, I'll zip my lip while characters wonder what could this possibly be. I apologize if you can hear like some noise in the background. That is my brother's dog playing with his toy. It's very wholesome. Now, I really wanted to give this game a go for it. I really did. It had a lot of cool things going for it and really fun ideas. I love the combat and how it flows and all of that, despite it being pretty simple to get a handle of overall. I love the general vibes of the game and some of the characters you control. Some of them are pretty funny. Some of them are pretty cool. Some of them I'm more interested to learn more about. I walked into this game like I did with Walking Dead and expected a AA weird action horror game, and that's exactly what I got. Unlike Walking Dead, I'm walking away mostly satisfied overall. However, there are so many moving pieces in the story that it really had no choice but to focus down to one point and rush through the other ends, and that absolutely sucks. And on top of that, while the repetitive structure of the game didn't bother me at all, I can see it really getting on some people's nerves. Some of the critiques that I've seen thrown out the game tended to include the fact that the game is dated in how it presents itself and how it works. Personally, to me, that's never really bothered me. Again, that was one of the things I liked about Walking Dead. One of the things I liked about Wanted Dead. Dated does not equate to bad for me, and considering the state of the modern AAA industry, maybe a little bit of dated in terms of, hey, we had some good ideas back in the day, let's do that again. That doesn't bother me. In fact, I welcome it. Just saying. What works here works, and the gameplay and the design of the game overall is not what bothers me. What drew the line at the end of the day, among my other criticisms from earlier, was just the story. That is where my criticisms came together, and I thought, yeah, this game is a caution for me. To reiterate, my caution rating is still a recommendation, albeit with a lot of yellow tape around it, just like it was in my Wanted Dead review. For a review, I need to take everything into account, including the game's asking price, not just my personal enjoyment. That's why even when I give games a go for it, I still provide some caveats, because no game is perfect. That's why in those go for it reviews, you tend to hear me say, if you didn't like this, that I said earlier that I love, then it's probably not for you. Get it on sale or don't get it at all. As for Slitterhead, I wasn't one of those people who thought, oh, this is from the creator of Silent Hill, so I'm expecting a 10 out of 10 industry-changing horror game experience. No, I just wanted a fun game. Now, did I get a fun game? Overall, yes, but it's not a game that I can immediately recommend to other people. As for Bokeh Studio, I am still very much looking forward to whatever they put out next, because this had a lot of potential. And if these are the kinds of games they'll be making going forward, I'm still totally down for that. Just because Slitterhead got a caution from me and ultimately left me satisfied but not super satisfied, that doesn't mean I'm going to cross the whole studio off my list. But that's all I've got to say about Slitterhead. If you want to play it for yourself, it's on PC, PS4, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S for $50 digitally or $60 physically. See what I mean when I say I took the price point into account? I would say if you're on the fence and you're following that caution recommendation from me, then I would say get this game at maybe like $40. $30 in my opinion, I don't think you regret it at $30. $50 for everything I've said, I can't recommend it at $50. I could say if you want to get it physically for either of the consoles, then by all means, but only if you really want a physical copy of the game. But anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed your stay, and thank you for listening to this long-winded review. I know I've repeated myself on occasion. I'm going to try and cut some of that out in post. Not that you would have noticed if I cut it out, some of that out in post. You get it. I'm TUSDarryl, and I'll catch you guys next time. Later. You really like munching on that toy whenever I start talking, don't you? Mm-hmm.